And
Anyway.
we're back.
And we're back. Oh, wait.
There you
Take
go.
93,000.
So,
Hi, Labs.
Hey. Hi, Andy.
Hey. How are you today?
I'm good. Somehow today is not as early as yesterday, and I'm a little more tired. I don't know what the deal is, but it's just like a gray day here in Los Angeles, which is unusual.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's affecting my mood.
You Los Angeles, like a
I'm
little
just
gray day, a little rain, everyone freaks out. It's like, oh my God, we can't
it's
drive.
like a snow. It's a snow day.
Yeah, exactly. It's a snow day. No one goes to school or work when it rains, like a sprinkle.
Totally.
Actually, yesterday, I was so glad we wrapped up when we did yesterday, like about 20 minutes after a storm blew through, that lightning hit like right next door.
Yikes.
It was so loud, and then everything went and it was really scary. And I just thought, oh my, first of all, I was glad no one got hurt. I'm glad that no property got damaged. And then I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad that we were done, because I would have freaked out. Like, it was right there. Like, it was crazy. It was so crazy. Anyway, I have to say, sorry.
We have a big day today.
I'm excited. This is going to be Happy Earth Day.
Happy Earth Day to you. We have our first guest already in the waiting room, who is our wonderful astronaut, Dottie Metcalf-Lindenburger. May I say a few words about her? Yes,
please. Dottie's amazing.
I know. You know her, and I can't wait to meet her. So let me give you some highlights. She was born in Colorado. She graduated with a degree in geology from Whitman College in Washington, and soon thereafter became a science teacher. In 2004, she was selected by NASA to be an educator mission specialist candidate, and then qualified in a short time later in 2006. She served as a mission specialist on STS-131 to the International Space Station, super rad. In 2012, became an aquanaut, which is a term I learned recently, as she commanded the Nemo 16 undersea exploration mission aboard the Aquarius Underwater Lab. It's
amazing. It's so cool.
Underwater. And then the most and then the most interesting fun fact that I found about Dottie is that she has also served as the lead singer of a band called Max Q, the members of which are all astronauts. So I want to invite her in, and then immediately I kind of just want to talk about that all day.
Let's do it.
Okay. Let's see how this works.
Oh, and then let's not forget, we're having an amazing conversation. It'll be Dottie and Glen, and there's Dottie.
That's right. Glen Phillips from Toad the Wet Sprocket will be here later as well. Amazing.
I should say yes. Hello, Annie.
Hi. Dottie, Dan, Dottie.
Yeah, nice to meet you.
So nice to meet you too.
Thank you for being here.
I was just reading some fun facts about you.
Yes.
First of all, I heard you were an astronaut. Super cool. And then on top of that, I hear that you are the singer in a band, or at least were the singer in a band called Max Q, which is made up of also all astronauts.
That's true. And we always stress that was not our day job, and we were a cover band.
What kind of songs did you play? Were there any space-related songs, or was it just fun?
Yeah, we did play a few space-related songs later, as we can. Like when I was in the group, we played "Drops of Jupiter." There's kind of a twist on Another Saturday Night, where it was a little bit original, the way they tweaked it to make it sound like Another Night on Orbit. But then it was a lot of like 70s, 80s covers. Yeah.
Amazing. I've done a lot
How
of
many
cover band
shows
work.
did you do as Max Q? Were there like lots of shows, or I've always been intrigued by that too, and always wanted to know more about that.
Yeah, so pretty much every year we would do a couple of standard shows where every year in February, there's a conference for educators at Space Center Houston. And it's a really big deal for, of course, like these teachers from across the United States to come in and learn about NASA, learn about the initiatives that are going on. Also, a lot of these teachers present how they're using NASA topics in their own classrooms. And then there's always a party at the very end, and we would play and other astronauts would show up. And so it was just a really great way to connect educators with astronauts and with flight controllers and everyone else there at Houston. So that was kind of a standard play. Then out at Galveston, every year the kind of an architectural competition in the sand for sandcastles. And so we would play there, and that was great because I mean, people are mostly just walking by, and we would play for a couple hours, you know, as the filler background noise. And sometimes people would come and gather up front, but it was not like that pressure. You're just kind of helping people enjoy the whole day. And then other times we'd play specific events. One time we went to space camp and played there. We played the last arrival of when they were retiring the shuttle. There's a mock-up wood frame that was coming from Kennedy Space Center to Space Center Houston, and so we played at an event there. That was really a sort of a saying goodbye, but also a celebration for all of the people that had worked on the space shuttle program. We played down in like Discovery Park in Houston for a big space event day. So it would just kind of be one-offs. People would invite us. They'd heard about us and they'd want to have our band.
Well, Dan, I think that we need to sign up Max Q as our management clients as well as a band. And then we need to get them on the road with like Tonic and Toad. And we just need to do like a whole extravaganza.
I'm into it.
Okay.
I wish like we, you know, the main folks that really kept it going over the years, like Drew Feustel, who worked on the Hubble Space Telescope and then also flew on the International Space Station. He is one of the guitar players and singers, and Steve Robinson, but Steve Robinson retired and is now a professor in California. So, you know, Chris Hadfield, of course, was huge in the band and is the person that asked me. Tracy Caldwell Dyson. So there's only a few people that are still at Johnson Space Center. The rest of us have retired and gone our ways, and it's hard to get the band back together.
Challenge accepted.
It's like the Blues Brothers. I love it. Dottie, you mentioned space camp. I read that you were the first graduate of the space camp to actually become an astronaut.
Yes, that is true. Yes. Actually, they've gone back a little bit and they realized that Sandy Magnus, she went as an adult a little bit before me, but it was an adult camp or like, so I'm the first kid, I guess. But yeah. That was after they did some digging. But yes, in April of 1990, I attended space camp. And of course, April of 1990 is a big deal because that is when Discovery is taking Hubble up to space. And so later this, you're starting to see announcements about that because it's coming up on another big anniversary. But yeah, so when I was there, everything was the talk of Hubble. And of course, later as a teacher, I would use Hubble imagery in my classroom to inspire students to start thinking about like, what is in our solar system, what's in our universe. And yeah, so it's pretty special.
Super Hubble cool. Is incredible. Hubble is so amazing. I'd love to bring that up when Glenn is on the phone too, because he's into photography. And actually that will be a great segue for later, because I do want to talk to you both about your social media stuff. You both take gorgeous photos, etc. But so I also am very happy for you and Dan to connect with each other because, you know, it's just so interesting. There's so many similarities between astronauts and band people. It's it's surprisingly similar. And I was mentioning to Dan just before that you were familiar with who Tonic was, and we'll mention to Glenn too in a minute, like that you had, we're going to go to the show or whatever. So I guess, have you ever had a question like for a musician? Has that ever like come up where you're like, gosh, I wish I could ask someone like,
I don't usually get to ask the questions, but I think my question would be, we're always asked like, what inspired us, right? Well, what inspired you to start doing music, and how do you stick with it how do you stick with doing your music?
Oh my gosh. I mean, I was, the earliest memory I have is just playing. I had, there was a stool that I took the legs off. I took 2 legs off of it, leaned it on the other 2, and I was banging on this little piano. It was like a piano bench that had a soft cover. And so I just think that it was always destined to be, like I was always going to play no matter what I did. And growing up kind of in, middle class New Jersey, it was expected that you would just go to school, at least in my family, and go to college, whatever. I went and actually got an engineering degree.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. But always playing in cover bands, and then started writing my own music, that sort of thing. Decided to come out to LA on a whim, and then had some good fortune, But even now, like I play less, but I'm still involved in the business completely. And I don't know, at this point, it's kind of like, what else would I do? So maybe start a podcast with Annie. Was the least expected thing in my whole life. It could be an electrical engineer and leave to go into a rock band was shocking for my family, but this is probably more so.
No, I think more shocking was when I asked you to help me pull together a music camp in like 2 weeks for an entire community. And you pulled it off brilliantly, I should say. Dan did a beautiful job, but Dan is one of my brothers, and all these crazy ideas. I'm like, so I was thinking, and then he's like, uh-oh. Like, uh-oh.
Yes, you as an educator, Dottie, can appreciate, being asked to, I am not an educator. I was always accused by my family of not being very patient. My dad wanted to learn drums, and I was like, I can't do it.
Yeah.
But yes, I did run some sort of, I don't know, what would you call that? Like a school of rock or something in Massachusetts. It was random.
It was random.
It sounds really cool.
It was great. It was great though. It was great.
But please, enough about me.
All right.
Dottie,
Cool.
so you graduated with a degree in geology, and you became a science teacher immediately thereafter, it seems.
Not immediately. I was actually going to go to the Peace Corps. I had signed up and been accepted and I was assigned to Kazakhstan to teach English, of course, which I was like, well, I'm not really, I speak English fine. I was concerned about the teaching part, but I was assigned to Kazakhstan, and then Kazakhstan, of course, pulled away from Russia and they wouldn't send me. And, so sometimes I'm not a patient person, because I probably could have waited maybe 6 to 9 months and they could have found a country to place me in. But I was like, oh my gosh, I think just that pressure of seeing your peers going off to either graduate school or joining jobs. And here I'm back in my parents' house and trying to kind of figure out like, well, what am I going to do? So I was volunteering as a cross country coach at the high school I'd gone to. And my parents were like, well, you were going to teach English, but the United States needs like science teachers. And what if you tried that? Because both my parents were teachers at one point. And so it's like, yeah, why don't I try that? So then I did become a science teacher. I went back to school to get the teaching certification portion that you need, and then became a teacher in Washington State.
And how long were you a teacher before you became an astronaut, or a candidate and then an astronaut?
Right. So right at 5 years, I was just finishing up my 5th year of teaching. I actually didn't finish in person. I had to leave substitute plans because then I had been hired by NASA. So when I applied, I had 4 years of teaching science.
Amazing. And do you feel like, I mean, I can only imagine that your approach to teaching post being in space had to have changed, you know, like, or had, there was some impact there from being in space.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, I never went back to a classroom, just singly a classroom, but I teach all the time when I do outreach to students and camps and all sorts of things. And I think the biggest change, of course, is being able to offer like the actual experience and say why I think these things are important. And also to make the connections of why we go to space. You know, before, I think you could talk about maybe a few spin-offs that came, well, for sure from the Apollo program, right? Like we could all point to our cell phones at the time, and they were kind of primitive, but even they were more sophisticated than what launched the early astronauts. But there's so many developments in all backgrounds of science because of space flight. And so just being able to actually talk to those details and still be inspired by those details, we still continue to learn so much more. And I can't always even keep up with what science we're doing on board the International Space Station, or as we get ready, of course, the engineering, getting ready for Artemis and going back to the moon. And so I just hope that I still convey that inspiration and also the absolute need for us to be science literate citizens.
Amazing. We have another very literate person now in the waiting room. The singer and songwriter Glen Phillips.
Before we let Glen in, you have to ask Dottie the question you ask everybody.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so I mean, we kind of covered it a little bit, but do you have a favorite song which is sort of space themed or space related?
Yes, and it will not. I guess it won't lean towards either of you. That doesn't mean I don't love your music. I was inspired in the '90s by the women. By Indigo Girls, and so on Orbit I played Galileo, and again,
Perfect.
like just for the reasons that his life changed how we think about the heavens and how we think about Earth, and because of course when I was at college, the fact that more women were showing up on stages, and I went to Lilith Fair a couple of times, and you know, and so that was what I played.
Did you have that T-shirt that had the drawing on it and it had like the Lilith? I wore that T-shirt through Threadbare.
I did not. I had a cool sweatshirt that I liked that it wasn't, I don't think it was Lilith Fair specific. It was Indigo Girls for sure. And it was a black sweatshirt that I wore for a long time.
Amazing. They're incredible. I remember my T-shirt was one of those ringers. Remember the ringer tees were like totally like that was all the I think I had some tonic ringers too somewhere along the way.
We might have made some.
Yeah.
We made some poor choices in merch along the way.
Let's get Glen involved in this crazy conversation.
Yes, he needs to be here.
I'm willing to bet that Glen Phillips has had ringer tees in his lifetime.
Indeed. There he is.
Hi, Glen.
How you doing?
Pretty good.
Hi. Good to see you.
Glen, Dottie, Glen.
Hello, Dottie.
Nice to meet you.
Great to meet you.
And you know Dan?
Hi, Dan. It's been too long. It's been forever.
It has been. I miss you.
Miss you too. We will catch up at another time to come.
Yes. Yes, please.
Your microphone sounds so good.
Good. This is the live streaming setup I use. So it's got all my crazy, hey everybody. So all my foot
sounds
pedals.
Incredible. Well, thank you for being here.
Yeah.
Before we talk about our topic, we've been chatting with Dottie a little bit, and I was wondering, Dottie, if you might share a little bit about the boys' night little tidbit that I got from before.
Well, Andy was asking, had I seen you in concert? And I was like, yes, I saw Toad the Wet Sprocket back, in the early 2000s when I was applying to become an astronaut. And my husband and I had gone to see the band. But then my husband is he has a man crush on you, and he more recently has had a chance to see you in person with a friend. And I had asked, like, can I come along? And I was informed, no, this is a guy's night, we're going to go.
You didn't just grab a friend and go anyway and hang out in the other part of the club?
Right, I should have just done that. That's exactly right.
That's the cue to be like that girl on the side. Even if you don't drink a drop, just start like off the side.
Just
Always goes over well.
Amazing. But I thought
That's why I'm not still married. Sorry.
So first of all, happy Earth Day. And as we all like to say, Earth Day is every day. So it's kind of amazing that we happen to be having this conversation today. So total coincidence, which we'll get into that a little bit more. But we actually also wanted to talk about education in general. And when we kind of pair up astronauts and rock stars, we try to find like 3 common touch points, because we figure like if we can do the 3 things, right, there's got to be some conversation. And then Dan, could you just tell them what our big philosophy is about our role in the conversation?
We do something very important, and that is we stay out of the way.
We try not to mess it up. So we guys are way smarter than us, have lived way more exciting lives. Well, you know, borderline Dottie, but anyway. So I guess we wanted to talk a little bit about education to start, something that I know, Glen, is important to you, and you talk a lot about school, and Dottie was just giving us a little bit of her history. But Glen, maybe we could talk to you a little bit about sort of education in general, and what is your position on education, not only in music, but just sort of for like your children, or do you have a particular philosophy related to education in general?
My philosophy is probably more do as I say, not as I did. In that I got a couple of years of college in, and then I started touring when I was 18. And my mom would always ask me. My parents were both. My dad's was an optical physicist. My mom got her degree in chemistry. They both met at Cal in the 60s. And so I was raised by scientists, and I am the only member of my family not to graduate from Cal. So, so my not completing college in my family was a difficult thing, but also it was because I was out on the road touring. But I recently went back to school, took a psychology class during the lockdown. Might go back to school for that. I mean, the thing about education is that I think what it does better than teaching you things is it teaches you to learn and to be curious. And actually, the thing that I feel the most deficit with in my educational path was not experiencing a higher and more challenging level of diversity where I would have to learn to write, learn to study, learn to push myself further than I did learn to. And I think those are the skills that last you through life. And as an autodidact, there's this feeling of incompleteness or insecurity when it comes to education. I'm kind of, and I think there's room for generalists, but, you know, for me, what I wish I had more of in my education is that just early confidence for the structural elements of learning, of the way to apply the curiosity in a way that builds up. But yeah, curiosity stays your whole life. I mean, that's the good stuff.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think that we're lifelong learners. So I don't think that you have to have a specific degree that says that you have finished. Like, I love that you went to school during the pandemic. Because that's what I even tried to explain in my family, and of course to my former students when I was a high school teacher, is that we learn through our whole life, or at least I hope so, because that keeps us growing, that growth mindset. There's so many things this year that I've thought about how I need to improve myself, and I like working to be an anti-racist, right? And realizing back in my own history what I have done. And so this time for reflection, for growth, for improvement, for curiosity, as you pointed out. I mean, that's of course like why we look to space. I think that's why prior to being in it, people have always looked up. Sometimes they had to, for whether it was guidance to travel or to understand when to plant or, start crops. So the curiosity is, I believe, really important within all of us. And as part of a lifelong learner, I mean, when I retired from being an astronaut, I didn't have a master's, so I went back to get my master's in geology. So I love that. I just really believe that you can't stop learning. It would be detrimental if we did. So.
And I mean, and what you said as well, in terms of social justice as well, part of, for me, to extend the idea of curiosity, it's not just about knowledge, but it's also about empathy and placing yourself. It's the moral imagination and emotional imagination to try to think what it would be like to have a different experience. And I think where people fail in terms of that empathy is, a failure of imagining other people as real, as authentic as they are. And, that's, as soon as you can put yourself in someone else's shoes, you see the world in an entirely different and more broad way. Yeah.
Dottie, you brought up something really interesting when you talked about things that you learned, or did in your childhood. And I was having this conversation with someone the other day too. And you just think about all of these sort of cultural touch points that when you're a kid, you don't really necessarily think through what a certain little phrase or rhyme might mean, or, and we were kind of going through like, oh my gosh, that's horrible. Like what we would say, or like a rhyme that we had for something. And so I guess sort of to your point, like you could have 10 PhDs, but there are certain things that are ingrained. And so I wonder, how does that awareness come about? Like, how did you suddenly become aware of these things? Because there might be people that don't even, sometimes you don't even realize until you realize, if that makes any sense. So how did you come to these realizations?
Probably with different layers and over time. So I think the first big realization was when I was an undergraduate, and my minor is in history. And I took a class on the history of immigration in the United States. And I had never really thought about how we kept purposely people out, how we categorize people based on their color of their skin, based on where they're coming from. And so that was kind of the first time I started thinking about it, and thinking about those applications. Then when I went to get my teaching certification, I'm very thankful that part of it was talking about the students that you're going to have in your classroom, from students from special needs that have great gifts to teach all of us, but that need specific ways to learn so that they can be a part of your classroom, to students of color, to, of course, women in sciences. So that was more purposeful, but still not, it's just like, I think it was a quarter long. That's not going to be enough to equip you to this year when you're in a pandemic and we're watching, and as we just saw this week with George Floyd, I mean, you're watching these horrific moments and wondering, how am I either helping us move forward or not? And so I just did a lot of reading. I still have a lot of reading to do. I'm just self-discovery, but I dug into, waking up white and white fragility and how to be an anti-racist, and just started trying to think about the things that I can do to do better.
Hey Glenn, maybe you have a similar experience. I found that just traveling more than the average person as a touring musician, that you're exposed to all of these subcultures of our country in a very, very real way, whether they're fans of yours or whether you meet them in coffee shops or diners along the way in the deep South, if you're from Jersey like myself, or whether it's a place in Jersey when you're from Southern California. I find that that was a very educational experience. And to your point as well, as the only person in my family without a graduate degree, I found that at some point, even my parents were like, you've been all over the world. Like they sort of almost acknowledged like the kind of the different worldview I have as a result of that, and had nothing to do with going to school. Like road school.
Yeah, and I also think there's the lubricant of music, which is such a powerful it's such a powerful tool for connection. And in the last few years, I've been doing choir leading. I've been very curious about non-performative music in terms, choirs where you're just we can't do it now. Hopefully someday it will be safe again. But you're in a circle of people facing each other, and I may be holding the tempo and the pitch together, but nobody's performing these songs. We're singing with each other. And it's such a powerful experience, the way that music brings people together. And in the same way, I was just listening to a podcast, Hidden Brain, talking about laughter. And there's this, woman who, and she was describing, neurologically, I think the description was, it was like meditating, exercising, and having sex at the same time in terms of, the amount of oxytocin and,
Wait, what was she again? I need to do that. That I'll have what she's having. What was that?
Yes, laughter. That is meditating, exercising, and having sex at the same time. But music is a similar thing. It really opens up people and breaks down barriers. And when you are a musician, also you tend to meet people at their most open. And so my view of humanity in the world is kind of based on my experience, which is mostly people being really open. My assumption about people is that they will be loving and kind and open. And I'm always a little, shocked and disarmed if they aren't. And part of my, as much as there's, educating yourself about your own, my, cis male white privilege. And I've found as well, I can get on my soapbox about social justice, but then I'm preaching to the converted as well. So what I've learned, also had to learn a ton about, is where my hackles go up around QAnon, Trumpism, extreme right wing. My partner and I, my girlfriend, we just moved to this new house, and right across the street from us, there's an American flag with a Blue Lives Matter flag right under it. And my first response was, oh, we got to fly a rainbow flag and a Black Lives Matter flag. And then my second thought was, I need to meet this person and learn to like them and communicate with them and not immediately throw them under the bus, and find what common ground there is. And so I'm like trying to challenge my own knee jerk, even in an effort to be anti-racist. How do I not just be that bleeding heart liberal that sends hardcore conservatives even deeper into their own silo and offers kind of different paths. So it's been, there was a moment last year where my girlfriend and I walked into a store, and a woman walked out with a Trump mask, in her late 60s. And she was just, you could tell with her eyes smiling at us beatifically. And we both wanted to yell at her. And I'd reached my own level of I couldn't stand feeling that angry and right. Hateful, and I was becoming exactly what I despise. And so this has been a really interesting year of figuring out not only how to reach out and have my empathy towards people of color, people who are discriminated against, but also how do I communicate with people to the right of me, and people who I see as being I think probably are heavily intolerant, but how can I find kind of the humanity inside them and move from that? And it's a bitch.
If you find the answer, let me know.
It's hard. And I mean, that level of it, I have a few friends. A few years ago, I put out an EP on privatized space travel, and I made a few friends at Goddard, which was awesome. And, one of them was talking about going to these Senate hearings and having, it was back in the Tea Party days, but he said, this one senator raises his hand and he says, why do we need weather satellites? Why do we need Earth focus? We have the Weather Channel. How do you argue with that?
And that's why science literacy.
Yeah.
So in terms of education music, I'm going to shift gears a little bit here. And I'm going to ask you guys, do you remember I'm not going to say do you, because I have a feeling all of you do. And Dan, you're in this too. What song do you remember most from Schoolhouse Rocks?
I'm just a bill.
A bill.
Yeah, I'm only,
a bill.
Yes, that is the one.
That is.
You don't remember Conjunction Junction?
That would be number 2.
Okay.
And
Yes.
Skilo did a really good cover of Mr. Morton is the object of my sentence, and what the predicate says he does. There's a great hip hop version of that.
Well, the reason I bring that up is I also wanted to bring up the topic of education through music or song. So we learn the ABCs as a song, right? I don't know if you guys can repeat the 15 of the United States. Does anybody else know that one?
I
My
know.
son did.
Alaska, Arizona. Okay, I'm not going to go through the whole thing.
Wait,
I will win a hard
but
bet with
I want to
anybody.
know if Dottie knows. Do you know Tom Lair's Elements song? Can you do the whole thing?
Oh no, I have not done that. But I used to play "The Sun is a Massive Incandescent Gas" from They Might Be Giants.
And then they updated it, right?
I think
It's
he
the
did.
sun is a great miasma of incandescent plasma.
Ooh, I gotta go back and now listen.
Slightly more accurate, apparently.
Oh my
It's a
God.
hit.
I do remember someone. I feel like one of my fellow astronauts. I feel like Tracy knew all of the elements because of that song. I guess she could sing it. She was also a chemist, so you know.
There you go.
There's that. But I was curious what you guys thought about this concept of music as a learning mechanism. And do we need to do that more?
Yes. I mean, as the non-musician, to me, like music has always been a part of my background. Of like, I always am in the choir. You know, that's what I grew up in as a kid. Because I'm not the greatest vocalist, but I do really like the blending and, but to me, there's always the music of our lives, right? The things that I like. Even preparing for this, I was like, you know, I know a lot of these songs because I had good friends in high school who introduced me to them. And so music helped me memorize things at times. I think it helps you connect to different periods. And I watched my own daughter who has now on YouTube, they had like different versions of math songs put to more current music. Like I remember there's a triangle one that she was having me listen to. I'm going to forget the artist that did it, but it was pretty funny. So I love it.
Very cool.
Now I'm thinking, wasn't there also a They Might Be Giants song that was like Triangle Man? Triangle
Yes.
Man?
Yes.
These guys,
Yeah.
they have the market corner, don't they? On the
They are
professorial rock.
professorial rock. Yeah. I think also, I mean, it depends. I kind of come at education and music in some ways. For me, it's like at an oblique angle. Like there's this, there's the kids' songs, which are about something, you know, specific. There's that side of thing. But, you know, I think as an adult, you can also kind of, you know, put up signposts for people, you know, for a reading list, right? I have a song called Baptistina, which is, and 2 weeks after my album came out, I think they determined that the asteroid that landed in Mexico was not from the Baptistina cluster. But it's a song about, you know, catastrophic change. It was inspired in part by a Radio Lab episode about called Apocalypse, and done as if it was like Oklahoma, like Apocalypse. And it was this, you know, description of what it would have been like on the ground, and you know all the rock being vaporized, going up into the atmosphere and coming down as this molten glass rain over, like, and so that came. I mean, for me, it was also about divorce and having my life change completely, and having to kind of welcome in and even praise this concept of change. You know, that the death of one thing is the birth of another, just as, you know, the mammals' rise came from this near complete planetary destruction. And I worked in a verse too that was referencing Octavia Butler's Parable of the Sower, which is this book about kind of post-apocalyptic, post-Western breakdown California, and this girl who invents a religion where God is change. And if you move with change, you have a life that's easier. If you work against change, you have more trouble. And so there's this so it's all kind of crammed in there, but it's a bit of breadcrumbs. Like there are people who think, who's Baptistina? She must have been cool. It's like, so there's this way of kind of placing information into a song where you can hear the song and know that it's about catastrophic change, but and there are bands like Alt J that do this for me. They're like the song Tarot, which is not about the root, but about the war photographer. And there's, where you start just Googling lines, other song that's, references to unpin your butterflies, Russia. It's like butterfly pins that, oh, it was kind of like of LGBT freedom. And like there are these, and I like looking up those bread when I reach a point in a song that I don't understand. And so I do a similar thing, not in all of my songs, but there's sometimes a bit of a reading list. And so if you're curious, you may find your way down a few other paths. So that was a long answer again. Sorry.
No, you do that beautifully. Someone that has known Glenn for a really long time and we work together, he'll send in lyrics to something. I will look up a word all the time. So I think it's a really beautiful little Easter egg, or it's an opportunity, right? If someone wants to do it, they can, but it doesn't alienate someone either, right? So I think that's a beautiful kind of idea under this sort of stay curious heading. And I also wanted to ask you guys, as you were talking, it made me think about like Hamilton, like where I learned a lot about our history from Hamilton. And it's sort of that same idea, right? Where it's this incredible, have you guys seen it, by the way? Have you seen the play? Has anyone seen the play yet?
I have not been to see it in person. I watched it on Disney, but first because my daughter was singing all the lyrics, it was like coming out and kids were identifying, you could watch it all on YouTube. And so she knew all of the lyrics, and I felt I didn't know very much about Hamilton. So I went and first read the huge, biography of Hamilton, and then went and listened, and I felt, wow. And I didn't know. And again, I think, that curiosity, like she spurred within me a curiosity because I didn't know what she was singing about.
That's a very astronaut solution, is to read the large biography first.
Exactly. I was literally just thinking, and yet another difference between me and Dottie, I was like, I went to go see the play on Broadway. It was awesome. I learned everything. And Dottie's like, nope, I read the entire, thick biography. It's incredible. Although, Glenn, I feel like you would read the biography as well. Dan, you'd probably be with me on Broadway.
I've become a little
of both.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, one other thing that we wanted to talk about today, in addition to sort of this education idea, was that I don't know if you guys had a chance to look at each other's Instagram, but you both, it's almost like it's like a yin and a yang of nature photography on your social media. You literally both post these beautiful moments, and I can picture either of you running through nature, or being Glenn, you had one, you were on a walk with your girls, and Dottie, you had one with your family. So I actually just wanted to ask you guys, what inspires you in these beautiful nature kind of moments to post these beautiful images?
Yeah, so, of course, my life has kind of been around Earth. I am an Earth scientist, right? But I grew up along the Front Range of Colorado, and I just thought you always were outside. My parents would take us on vacations to, or just drives. It was up an hour up the canyon out of Loveland, where I was growing up, into Rocky Mountain National Park. And then eventually, of course, you got the road trips to Yellowstone and to the Grand Canyon and those stories. But just both of them put in this appreciation for me for nature. And so when I met my husband, Jason, the same thing, like both of us were really drawn to backpacking and being outdoors. And probably one of my favorite summers was with him. Since we were both teachers at the time, we took that summer off and we backpacked through King Sequoia, Yosemite, and then around into Sedona and the Grand Canyon, and then back up to see my parents and through Mesa Verde and those areas. And just that being, I think of nature as a place of freedom, where you can feel your soul and you can just see this intense beauty and colors.
Amazing.
I've got, I guess, a two-part. Whoops! Why did my reverb turn on?
Nature, 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 nature.
Nature.
Yeah.
Vibe it up.
I would say part of it is that I just have an issue with social media. It's something that's required now, but I don't like broadcasting or selling, and so I almost completely forget to do Instagram when I'm home, and I don't I don't want to take that shot over and over again, and I make that face so nobody needs to see that. So for me, it's also getting to turn the camera out, and when I'm inspired and seeing something beautiful, that it's often the thing. That's what interests me. And when I'm on tour with the band, we get to be in a bus, so I get to wake up in the town, so I get to run, and and most American towns are built along some kind of waterway, and most waterways have some kind of path. So that's where I end up pretty much every day. And it's funny that we have to remind ourselves to be in nature. I mean, that's this human thing, right? Where we have all these myths of the fall from some time when we were at one with nature, and at some point we started talking and building things, and using the opposable thumbs, and suddenly nature was something outside of ourselves as opposed to something that we were a component of. And even the gods switched from being the very things we lived among to being these very kind of distant and inaccessible things. We went from animism to this kind of angry sky god monotheism, and so for me, there's just a lot of there's a great deal of importance for me in anything that kind of brings me back to that feeling of union and being a part of nature instead of feeling threatened by it and separate from it. And I fight that as much as I fight for kind of daily presence and fighting against my ADD and all these awful devices that make me more ADD. Anytime I go on a hike, I'm restored. Anytime I get out in nature, or go to the beach and just sit or run, I kind of remember how good it is to be alive. So that's, yeah.
It is like a therapy, isn't it? Even living in Los Angeles, where there are mountains, there are canyons, there's the beach, and you have to kind of force yourself to go see or be in any of those. It's troubling to look back on it, how little I've seen the ocean in LA. I've seen the Jersey Shore where I grew up far more than I've seen the Pacific Ocean, I think.
Yeah, I'm really grateful. My girlfriend for the last 3 years, and we just moved in together at the beginning of the COVID shutdown, and she teaches 8th grade English. And she teaches yoga as well, and her self-care, her knowledge of herself, and that if she does not use her body and she does not go outside into nature, she knows she gets anxious, and so she is religious about it. It's a practice that is unquestionable in her life. And I am so lucky to be dragged along with that, because I'm more like, I'm going to check more emails. My job's never done. And she's just, and it's really good for me.
Yeah.
Have you run for a long time? Like, did you grow up running too? Or when did that start for you?
I completely ignored my body until I was about 30. And my dad did too. My dad was so much in his mind and so fascinated, with I guess the more theoretical world or the, the world of physics, that he kind of ignored his body and ignored colon cancer until it was terminal. And so when I was 27, he passed away and I had not been physical at all. And then when I was 30 as well, like I had a body that was resilient enough that I could not use it at all. And then when I got 30, my neck started getting big and I kind of, out of pure vanity, actually started running. And then I realized it made me happier in every other way. It wasn't just about my neck. And also thought that maybe I wouldn't kind of repeat my father's, an otherwise brilliant man, my father's kind of mistake. So I think between his death and my vanity, and so I've been running now for 20 years, but I totally ignored my body until I was 30 years old. The only good part about that is my knees are in pretty decent shape.
Yeah, that's
I was
50.
say, as I have to keep shifting and wiggling because of my knees. Yeah, you buy yourself some time. Dottie, you've been running forever, right?
I asked because I didn't start running until I couldn't make it any further on the volleyball team in high school. And that my teacher came to me and said, like, you're not going to play varsity volleyball, but you could run varsity cross country. And that's because I'd run track and I'd done pretty well. And I was like, yeah, you guys run a lot. and then, but I did that. I was like, when I thought about it, I was like, you're right. And I really like the people. And for everything that you were talking about, from being in different cities, like I've always loved the sport because all you have to have is a pair of shoes, and it's probably good to have running shoes, but you don't necessarily have to, right? And I've coached cross country to students, and my best friends still tend to be the people I ran with in college, just because it's that time every day we were talking, and it's probably therapy and it's being outdoors. And I didn't really think about how much I used running as therapy until I wouldn't have it, when I either got injured or was in a place where, you just couldn't do it all the time. And so, yeah, I just really identify with what you were saying, Glenn, because it has always been this outlet for me. And now I've incorporated actually to my betterment, yoga, and some other things that allow me to experience exercise and mindfulness, but not tear down my knees.
Yeah.
I do run, but just not every day anymore.
Yeah. And yoga for me has been, in the last, I dabbled a little and have been more consistent. And to wake up and do a flow, there's something about, as much as there's the calming aspect of it, there's also just these moments, I always go back to, Warrior 3 as being this thing of like, you can't do anything else except Warrior 3. And it's these moments that force you utterly into present tense, because you're gonna fall down if your complete awareness is not on what you're doing. There's no option. And it takes a lot to cage me into a place where my mind isn't going all over the place. And there's these handful of poses that I can't think of anything else. And it's like that fuels the rest of my day in a really profound way.
Yeah.
It's essentially meditation, right? I think that's my son, of all people, turned me on to transcendental meditation, where you have a mantra, and that's any other thought, you just bat it out of your head with the mantra, and it's been very helpful. But it sounds very similar.
I would think for you as well, like karate would be, right? Was that your discipline?
Yeah, I did Taekwondo for about 20 years, but that messed up my knees pretty good. Oh. I've had one meniscus surgery, maybe looking at another one now.
Oh.
Okay, so in order to prevent this from turning into what the normal phone call will be like, how are you? Well, my back hurts and my knees are...
I had a
which is basically how every
December,
conversation starts with anyone these days. I'm going to shift gears a little bit, and I wanted to talk a little bit about technology. the reason I wanted to talk about technology, sort of as related to the environment, is with NFTs. And this is something that Glenn and I both just did a lot of research on, and something we were considering working on. And Dottie, just so you know too, it was something that I was considering doing, with astronauts. But then once I started understanding the environmental impact, because I talk about education, I mean, this was sort of like a Google self-education, right? And reading Wired magazine articles and wherever I could find the information. But I personally, I'm not interested to do NFTs because of the environmental impacts. And I don't know if there will ever be a good balance for that. That's my personal thought. It sort of reminds me of, like, do you guys remember in the touring business where everyone would be like, well, you can buy to offset your carbon emissions. And then we all found out that like all that stuff was all nonsense too, for the most part, because then they were just like buying. I mean, it sort of turned into this whole, I shouldn't say it was nonsense. It just, there was a lot of imperfections maybe in that. So I guess my question is this: are you guys familiar with NFTs? And if not, how do we use what we do, whether it's launching rockets into space or technology or touring on a tour bus? How do we take all these things that we're all going to do, but how do you do it in such a way that can be hopefully making things better and less impactful on Mother Earth? Sorry, that's like 20 questions in one, but
Pick one.
yeah.
That's a hard question. I mean, with NFTs, the easiest way to win is not to play, right? It's you just, doing things that are that computationally expensive and have to be maintained through computational expense is wasteful.
Can you explain that to us too? Like, Dottie, I don't know if you're familiar with have you seen the NFT stuff that's been all trending with a lot of...
No, not enough. I did a tiny bit of research before because you had it on our sheets, but I didn't know much about NFTs, so I had to go do some research, and I didn't do enough.
Glenn, do you mind telling us a little bit about it?
I don't know a ton about it, except that it's using blockchain to basically kind of you're creating a digital item that is traceable in the same way something like Bitcoin would be, right? Except you're adding a picture to it or something. So it's like a limited single item, but that's using, and I've been told there's versions of, some guy was talking to me and saying, oh, there's certain ways of doing blockchain that are kind of really messily, more computationally intensive, kind of needlessly so. And then there are other more efficient ways of being done. And I guess what I don't know is how much, what is the cost of the maintenance of those, or if it's just the mining of the original. But, there are these estimates now that, Bitcoin and these blockchain cryptocurrencies are using now as much or more energy than the country of Italy.
I read that statistic as well.
Annually, yeah. And so they're not free. They're not cheap. And just because something is digital and non-physical doesn't mean it doesn't have impact in terms of servers and, the cooling required, the energy required, and the resources required. So there's, just concern about the, kind of the wastefulness of it. And in some ways, it's just another way of kind of, for me, it's this new way of inventing a type of scarcity and a kind of false sense of worth. Yes, it is actually scarce, but creating scarcity is a poor way to kind of rig an economy or the worth of an object. Manufacturing it purposefully, which is different than making a painting, and it is inherently scarce because there's only one of it. And this is a way of taking something that anyone could have and kind of, marrying that uniqueness onto it and then valuing it for that. And then instead of valuing the inherent worth of the thing being made. So it's like, I feel like it's very sexy and very now. And, the whole world of the, Bitcoin cryptocurrency, I know people who are terribly excited about all of this. And mean, to me, all money is false. Money is an agreed upon illusion that helps an economy to function, and the value of money is even, it's a universally held fiction that, once again, is functional. But yeah, I mean, the idea of the new in that was very very shiny for half a minute. I remember emailing you, Annie, and going, "Should we put our album out as an NFT?" And then the next day, it was in the news with Kings of Leon having done it. It's just been this firestorm ever since. And once again, it feels just kind of false. And, I think back to the larger question you asked, and sorry, I'm talking too much. I'll try and wrap it up. Like, there's a constant question of being part of this culture. We're using, between this device and the device I'm talking to you on, they're horrific for the environment, as good as the companies are trying to be. The energy we use, the houses we live in, buying new clothes. My kids morally, like, they just won't buy anything. They will buy shoes, like running shoes. You don't want to buy used running shoes. Everything else, they think it is a sin to go to the store and buy a new piece of clothing. They just think it's wrong. There's too much in the world already. And so that they're, and to be on tour, we have to ask, is it worth, going out in the bus, that environmental, and it takes a lot of work if you want to do it on biodiesel. But then if you're doing biodiesel, if you're doing virgin biodiesel instead of recycled biodiesel, it's actually worse for the environment because it's monocrop and there's runoff. And I know a band... I know a band, Mom Muse, from Sebastopol, California, and they don't tour on the East Coast because of the carbon footprint. They won't get on planes. And they were talking, I was talking to one of them about, like, they were thinking maybe they wanted a booking agent to take some of that load off. They mostly play in, like, Unitarian halls and, community centers and things. And they could easily tour on the East Coast, but they basically stay within a driving radius. One of them has a kid now. They're married. They have their home, and they've decided that's as much environmental impact as they are willing to have as a band. And they just drew a line. And and for me, it was this year I got invited back on the Kayamo cruise, which is usually like Sean Colvin and Richard Thompson. It's it's the best musically, but it was. The week that I got invited back was the week that it came out that 1 million species were about to go extinct. I couldn't do a cruise ship, and I had to draw a line there and go, I travel because it broadens my mind. I love it. That's where my selfishness comes in. But what's too much? And for me, somehow going, okay, cruise ships are just optional. they have, I have to draw my line somewhere so I can sleep at night. But
and Dottie, as an astronaut, you cannot take the shuttle and just drive around Florida, right? Like, it's not like there's an option as an astronaut to be like, hey, we're not going to go to the space station today. We're just going to drive around in our local. I mean, that's not an option, right? But there are new things and new technologies and reusing rockets and things like that. So I'm curious to kind of get your take on, like, the evolution of space exploration, especially since, we are just like cooking with gas, like it is happening, right? So what are some of the things that can help?
Yeah, yes, I really appreciate this thoughtful conversation because we do have huge footprints. So I think the good part is that we're seeing the commercial companies of SpaceX, Blue Origin, and others. And NASA had been doing this as well. Of course, portions that are reusable. The shuttle was reusable. So having this ability to reuse, but at the same point, knowing there's just a huge amount of resources entailed, and the fuels and what is the energy left behind to dissipate, et cetera. But on the other side, the International Space Station piece, the science that has come out from making things more available to improve our energy use back here. So the battery technologies that, batteries use metals that are rare earth and things like that, but can they store this energy, especially solar energy, for longer and longer periods of time, where you have a one-time cost, which with an environmental cost, right? But then you can prolong it for outwards. Another example, I think one that I talk a lot about because of my background in earth sciences and working with environmental scientists, is the water cycle on orbit. When we were launching water, that is just, it's a huge cost for so many reasons. But when we were able to start recycling urine and sweat and water vapor, and that process, I mean, it had, of course, a need in space, but it has application back here on Earth on the very water systems that we use back here. So there are great benefits. And again, it's, oh boy, where do you, the cost benefits, it's messy. Just gonna say it's messy. It's not easy to say either way, but being a person in a technological world, I do think that there are gains that we get from technology, but I'm not going to be naive and say that there are just not great costs as well. Yeah. And it's hard.
I would add to that too, the earth-facing science and what we know about climate change because of the earth-facing science, simply the impact of the big blue marble picture.
Yeah.
And like knowing how thin the atmosphere is and the reflection on how precious this planet is. We need that global consciousness instead of just a local consciousness. And
exactly, which goes back to the education, right? I mean, it's so funny because even hearing you guys talk, all of this kind of goes back to like awareness and education. I mean, it's sort of one of those things that like NFTs, we were about to jump right on it until we learned more about it. And we were like, whoa, put on the brakes. Like, no. Or Dottie, like learning more about what are those implications for space travel? And then what are those learnings of how it's, used on Earth? I think it's amazing. And I know we're up to an hour, but I would be remiss not to bring something up here. So in terms of music and funny storytelling, so Glen has a record that I believe, is this happening that it's going to be, The Secret's going to be put back out on streaming someday or?
Well, I would need to talk to Compass Records about it.
Okay, all right.
Especially if I'm adding another thing. And there's a lot that we have lots to talk about, Annie, in terms of that. So, but I made an EP that was kind of inspired by, I was supposed to write a bunch of songs and a friend and I were going to produce a record together, and he showed up at my house and I said, I have no songs. What are you into right now? And he said, the Anasazi X Prize. And I said, okay, should we do a privatized space travel themed album? He's like, sure. So so we did an album that includes, the Bigelow inflatable and so it has him, where his real plan was to do these inflatable space stations so he himself could get closer to the aliens to be abducted. There's a song called Space Elevator it's about it's kind of somewhere between like love in an elevator and a somewhat accurate song about space elevators, which are a way to reduce the carbon footprint of going into space, except if they fail. Anyway, and I just wrote a new song that was kind of about an AI kind of returning its human cargo from the Oort cloud after they're all sleeping in cryo, and the ones that survive will be treated as heroes. But even musing, I've read a few books. What would an AI would have to be? Really curious and patient and loving and tender. Like what would the personality be? So anyway, it's a weird little EP. That's all.
I could probably place a song somewhere. Like I'll be like, oh, why don't I put a song, on a playlist, and then I listen to the lyrics. For example, Solar Flare. And I'm it starts, you think it's like a kid's song. It's like a kid's song, like Morrissey is a kid's song. You know what I mean? And you're just like, oh my gosh, there's all this doomsday and destruction and
it's good. It's kind of like it's Goodnight Moon plus inadequate shielding and bad timing. There's another song that's kind of another odd kind of it's the human side of these things. There's some far off murder, and I decided that this ship was called the Spirit of Shackleton. Anyway. It was fun. It was just the nerdiest thing I've ever done. But hopefully it will get. It's kind of no longer on the streaming servers, so I need to get it back up there.
Anyway, thank you for telling us about it. It's fun. It's definitely fun.
Sounds genius.
That's how I made my friends at Goddard. By the way, they'd been Toad fans, and then they heard the EP, and then they were like, you got to come by. So I actually, my friend Jonathan and I, and this was a long time ago, but we got to put on bunny suits and go in and like touch the LRO. He was the software kind of software manager for the LRO. So it was really, really exciting for us.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
And I think sorry, just something there, but I think that's like the beauty, right? Like, just as much as you were excited by that, they are also like, I think that's the part that we get excited about, meeting musicians and talking and like thinking to the experience. I just think that's kind of the neat beauty about humans when we are actually connecting on a real level. Like, we get excited about what others are doing because it's humans, and they're, something I can't do, so I get excited because someone else can do it and they're sharing it with me.
Mm-hmm. And I love the energy too. Like, do you know Arlen Bartel?
No.
But he was one of the primary guys in the, what was the one where they were doing, it was like the comet flyby and, drilling and just, he always has his like leather jacket, and he like, there's a thing about doing that level of intricate science, and it's so much planning and so much prep, and that when it happens, it's the fastest drag race in history, right? It's like, and the scientists working on it know this and see this, and like the tolerances, if anything goes wrong, like it's going to be like the worse than the worst NASCAR wipeout ever. But it's like a slow game in the same way, like that animators have to work in this frame by frame way to then create something that looks really exciting and kinetic, and the science that goes and the preparation that goes into the, getting any NASA endeavor ready to happen. And then the real time, like, fingers, like, for what you have done, like, this is risky business. This is not a safe job. And the exhilaration of that, and the trust in the team, and the, it's like the emotional weight of that is so overwhelming and impressive. I'm just like always amazed at it, and of the respect, the communication, and just the joy from the people who do this work is really phenomenal. I mean, they love their jobs more than almost anybody I've ever met, except maybe musicians. But there's a reason for that. Musicians complain more, I think, than NASA people.
Agreed.
No.
Oh, Annie can tell you stories.
Anyway, well, I also don't think Glenn. I think we're a little bit in overtime here, but Glenn was on the phone before when we were talking about our triple threat tour one day with Max Q, Tonic, and Toad the Wet Sprocket. So,
do you know who Max Q is, Glenn? That is a band for which Dottie was the lead singer, and all members were/are astronauts. So we are not qualified to be members. Maybe or with them.
But let's just stress here, I'm one of a couple singers, and it was not our day job, and we were a cover band.
What was the signature song? Like the We Nailed It song.
The We Nailed It song. I'm trying to think the one that we played that had a little bit of originality was Another Saturday Night, but instead of I Ain't Got Nobody, it was like an Orbit one, and being on orbit. So it kind of ventured a little creative, but still kind of a little cover band. I mean, yeah, it's fun. I'm not sure that we ever quite nailed completely any one song.
I will have to ask, though, on a rock and roll question, because I've never been able to ask an astronaut this. Do you agree that while Rocket Man may be a truly great song, that it might have the worst, I feel like it has the worst second verse of any great song ever written. Mars ain't a place to raise your kids. In fact, it's cold as hell, and there's no one there to raise them if you did.
It doesn't make a lot of sense.
Oh my God.
You just need to remember Rocket Man, Rocket Man.
I know, the chorus is amazing. It's a great song. It's a great song.
Exactly. Yeah, sometimes you can't listen in all the detail and take it literal.
Yeah.
It's like talking to astronauts about the veracity of movies that have come out, right?
Yeah.
Where you probably just shoot holes and be into you. I have to leave. I can't even watch this movie.
No, my daughter has made me make the agreement that when we go watch a space movie, I have to leave like my thinking part out and just try to appreciate the story and the creativity and concepts.
Is there anything you can stand in that job? I mean, because for me as a musician, it's basically pretty much limited to this is Spinal Tap, which even though it's parody, is the only one that really gets it right, and maybe Almost Famous. That's about it. Everything else, I like. So, are there a handful of sci-fi movies that you're willing to, like, just go, okay, I'm all right?
Oh yeah, I love Star Wars movies. So even though people are walking around the ships and can go outside without spacesuits on, I really don't care. And yeah, that might be about that's. I watched the others and I enjoyed them. I enjoyed Gravity. I enjoyed other. Oh, I did. So okay, Andy Weir does a lot of research. So The Martian, I did really like. I like the book better, but as you heard, I already like books better anyway. But I really did enjoy that, and so yeah, those.
Okay, thank you.
That was a great book. That was a great book. I agree. The book, I like the book better than the movie, but what a great book.
Yeah, enjoyed it.
Anyway, well, on that note,
have we done our job, Annie? We've not messed it up.
Rocket Man thing might be like the ending finale because that was really something. But anyway, Dottie, thank you so much for taking the time today. And Glenn, thank you so much for taking your time today. And we hope that this is just the first of many conversations. And we're so happy to have connected you guys because, again, I think there's like, even just looking at you on screen, you look like cousins or something. I don't know.
We're all cousins.
Yeah.
Really good to meet you, Dottie. Great to meet you.
And thank you guys so much. I had such a good morning here. Thank you.
And Dottie, we'll see you on tour. You'll come when next time when Glenn and Toad and everybody's out in your neck of the woods. You'll have to come to the show with Dan and Tonic.
Great to see you again, Dan.
Okay.
You too, buddy.
Bye. Love you all. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.